While the channel is obviously called MMA Dive, that doesn't mean we're not going to poke our noses into other sports from time to time when the occasion calls for it. And yeah, obviously don't hold your breath for our NBA playoff takes, or any form of deep dive into the lack of defensive prowess displayed by Harry Maguire this season. But given that the Gypsy King, the heavyweight champion of the world, Tyson Fury, managed to secure a massive victory last weekend, we did feel compelled to jump in and give our opinion. And while that fight and the masterful display turned in by Fury are worthy of attention in their own right, the real reason we're coming you today with the video is because of the post-fight interview from Fury that he shared with the UFC heavyweight champion of the world, Francis Ngannou. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on the fight itself, but in a nutshell, Fury was able to pretty much nullify Dillian Whyte in 99% of the exchanges, keeping his countryman off of him with relative ease, removing weapons from his arsenal one by one, before eventually finishing him with a swift uppercut in the 6th. Like many of you, I had predicted a Fury victory, but I really didn't foresee him coming up against so little in the way of trouble from the elite heavyweight that stood before him. So yeah, it was a masterclass that showed the continuing evolution of Tyson Fury, a performance that once again puts his status as the greatest in the world beyond any question. Or at least it did for most. Obviously, the Alexander-Usyk fight is the one test, or the one question that most would agree we need an answer to, a bout that would bring together two of the most talented fighters in the heavyweight division, to give us a definitive statement as to who the number one is. I mean, for me, Tyson is obviously the number one, but there are still some questions beside it until he fights Usyk or Joshua and brings all of those belts together for one winner-takes-all 12-round contest. But anyway, after he defeated Whyte in that 6th round, something interesting happened. Fury's post-fight interview saw an invitation extended to the UFC heavyweight champion, Francis Ngannou, who just so happened to be standing there in the ring alongside him, as the Gypsy King called on them to engage in a cross-promotional boxing MMA hybrid superfight, one that would serve as perhaps the biggest spectacle and payday of both of their careers. The two of them then had a cordial exchange inside the ring, and before he had left the building, Tyson had quote-unquote retired from the sport of boxing, fulfilling a promise to his wife that, according to him, should have seen him bow out after his most recent fight with Deontay Wilder. But this dip into hybrid combat sports, it seems, won't break his promise, and all of a sudden, the fighting world is full of discussion surrounding if this will happen, how and under what rule set it might happen, and perhaps most importantly of all, who will win. Well, obviously there is a lot up in the air about these questions. While the UFC are technically still in possession of their heavyweight king, he has no fights left on his contract, and if the reports are to be believed, he will be a free agent come December. On top of that, his very public issues with Dana White and the promotion's treatment of him, their treatment of fighters in general, it makes any form of possible reconciliation less and less likely. Ngannou's position as the title holder in the sport's most famous and historically significant weight class sees his growing reputation as an anti-establishment figure hold quite a bit more significance than it would have otherwise. And though his very appearance in the ring in a different sport, under a different promotional banner, was a statement in its own right, if he ever did manage to pull off a fight with Fury, the precedent that would set, on top of the precedent he has already set, it could truly be something uniquely special. And it wouldn't be like the UFC co-promoting alongside Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, so everyone can make a quick payday and bounce. This would be an undisputed champion, the heavyweight champion no less, deciding to take his career prospects into his own hands, speaking out against the UFC, and forcing his way into a fight that would see him earn far more money than he ever could under Dana's thumb, and I do think the sport needs that. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content and would like to stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads, be sure to subscribe to the channel now to avoid forever being branded as a dosser, because nobody wants to be a dosser. Also, we recently set up a Patreon account, so if you want to help support the channel, the link is in the description. So anyways, as far as the bout itself and how competitive it might be goes, well, obviously a lot will depend on the rule set. Early talks have suggested that Fury is willing to meet Ngannou somewhere in the middle, taking on a boxing matchup in the ring, but using 4-ounce MMA gloves. Now that of course introduces a very real element of danger for the Gypsy King, an element of unknowns that could give Ngannou something to work with here. A major question as well is how the clinch will be organized under this rule set. Will it be similar enough to boxing that Francis won't have time to work in the way that he would inside the octagon? But even in saying that, Tyson has shown himself to be incredibly skillful in that area. I mean, just look at that Dillian Whyte fight. I think for now, we'll have to wait until we know more, because we will know a lot more once this starts to pick up momentum. But for me, the fact that it's not a straight boxing matchup says a lot, gives the fight more of an even feel, although I certainly would back Tyson Fury to win quite heavily. He's just another level of technical, and even if his defense is somewhat compromised due to smaller gloves, it's hard to know if the gulf in quality will be made small enough for Ngannou to capitalize. That said, he does have ridiculous power and a granite chin, and I think it would be wise not to underestimate how much of an adjustment Fury would have to make in order to retool his skill set for a fight like this. 12-ounce gloves obviously open up a lot of doors defensively that just aren't a factor with MMA's smaller 4-ounce gloves, and that for me makes this infinitely more appealing than a regular boxing fight. Again, I'd pick Tyson Fury under almost any circumstances that could be deemed fair, but those 4-ounce gloves certainly make the idea of an Ngannou upset that bit more appealing. But even looking at the Cyril Gane fight, how thoroughly the Frenchman was able to dominate proceedings on the feet, even with his kicks in mind, it does give you an idea of how a skilled striker can freeze the heavyweight champion up. But I'm not going to dwell on that too much now. Is it realistic? I would say yes. In this day and age, it's a rare chance to see the #1 heavyweight in the two biggest combat sports on the planet going head to head, and though I would prefer to see Fury take on Alexander Usyk, or the winner of his fight with Anthony Joshua, who knows, maybe we'll be able to live in a world where we get both. But what do you think of a matchup between these two heavyweight superstars? Do let us know your opinions in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thank you for watching.